Welcome to the Spatial Gardener tutorial for Godot, a plugin for painting plants and props in your levels. I'll teach you how to add a gardener to your scene, how to set up a plant mesh and configure its placement settings, how to paint, erase, and update your plants, and what kind of optimization this plugin uses. You'll be using this playground scene as a testing ground, and by the end of this tutorial, you'll be able to create a diverse environment like this one. But first, about this plugin. It's used for painting any kind of props or foliage with even distribution on arbitrary surfaces. This is a single-player plugin and works best with finite, medium-sized levels. It's relatively stable on Windows, but needs additional testing for other platforms. I encourage you to share your own experience here, on my Discord or on GitHub. There's two parts to this: quick start tutorial and an in-depth look at all the properties. You should have Godot engine installed. If not, you can download it from the official website. Minimum and most compatible version is 3.4.2 and can be easily found on Godot's GitHub. Godot 4 is not supported at the moment, it's not even released yet, so yeah. Grab a copy of the demo project from GitHub. Link is in the description. Open the page, go to Releases, find the latest version and download the Godot Spatial Gardener demo.zip. Save, unpack, and launch the project. If editor screams errors at you, it's probably re-inputting the assets and should be fine soon. Make sure the plugin is enabled by going to Project, Project Settings, Plugins, Spatial Gardener, and ticking the Enable checkbox. This project comes with a few things besides the plugin itself. In the demo folder, you'll see a bunch of files used to build two demo scenes at the very bottom: Showcase and Playground. Showcase is a full-blown demonstration that you can play to test the plugin in-game. Feel free to play around. Playground scene is where you're going to work, so open it. This will be our main scene, so you can set it as default in Project, Project Settings, Application, Run, Main Scene. To work with the gardener, you'll need to level geometry with collision. Here we have an island and two buildings with auto-generated static physics bodies. Take a look at their collision layers. First layer, Gameplay, is used for game collisions such as interaction with the player. The second, Painting, is reserved for foliage painting. Notice how landscape interacts with this layer, but buildings do not. I assume you don't want to paint on buildings, but it's really up to your artistic choice. Go to the scene tree and add a node called Gardener. It will handle the entire drawing process. Every gardener maintains a subtree of nodes that are essential for its functionality. You can have however many gardeners you need, but you should not add or remove any descendants. Select your gardener and choose its working directory. All your plants and brushes will be saved here. Now choose collision layers that our gardener interacts with. Disable gameplay layer and enable painting. Now we can paint on landscape objects but ignore buildings. Because of some engine quirks, you can see a transform gizmo of your gardener. It can't be hidden, but it will ignore all your inputs. Instead, your mouse will control a foliage brush. Now to the gardener panel. Top side is for brush settings, everything else is for plants. In the middle there is a box with the plus sign button. Click it to create a plant. Now click the plant itself and you'll see a list of all its properties. To paint a plant, you mostly need only two basic things: a mesh and a desired density. For the mesh, LOD variant is what you'll use. A bit of theory first. For plants to look good, they need a lot of polygons and high-resolution textures. There's usually hundreds if not thousands of plants in a level. Multiply these and you get a molten graphics card. But we rightfully assume that players can't see that well in a distance, so it's fine for faraway plants to have less detail. This concept is called level of detail, or LOD for short. We'll make 2, 3, 4 separate models, each simpler than the last, and then switch between them depending on the distance. That's what LOD variants are for. Add 3 variants. Now go to Demo, Playground, Plants, Pine, and find 3 meshes named Plants, Tree, Pine, LOD.mesh. You should assign them in order of simplification. Drag LOD0 to the first plant, LOD1 to the second, and LOD2 to the third. Next, the density. Set plants per 100 units to something small like 15. It defines how many plants to place in a 100 by 100 unit square. This number is very approximate and can be off by around 30%. Not to mention circular brush shape does not account for corners. So, to get the feel of the density, you really should play with this number a bit. Problems may arise at low density and small brush size. If you have obviously too many plants, try increasing the brush size. We will use something like 75. You can also drag the right mouse button to quickly set it. Now let's paint. Tick the paint box for our trees, press left mouse button and drag across the island. To center camera on the brush, press Q on your keyboard. That's it, we now have trees. If you go to the Gardener debug viewer at the top and select View First Active Plant, you can see how trees are referenced in 3D space. This structure is called an octree, and it optimizes iteration over thousands of spatial objects. This is needed to switch our LODs according to the camera distance. Set LOD max distance to 100 and zoom your camera in and out. Observe how the tree meshes change. Click Configure Octrees. Default values here are meant for something more dense, like bushes. It assumes 75 objects can fit into one cube. Let's change max chunk capacity to a more reasonable 10 and click Apply. Also, by default, Octree generates in the center of our gardener and expands outwards as you paint. As a result, we have a lot of empty space. Let's optimize it with Recenter Octree. It will perform a bit more predictably from now on. Now let's add some variety with randomized scale and rotation. But first, choose the erase brush and clear ourselves a little patch for testing. Random scale range generates a random scale for our object. Go to the second column and set the X value to 1.5. All other values in this column turn to 1.5 as well, because of the constraint above. The scaling type. Uniform ensures proportions of an object will be preserved. Now when we paint, our trees will get a slightly randomized size within these bounds. Next comes the random rotation. Y rotation, our yaw, is by default set to 180 degrees. It means our trees already have a full circle randomized rotation. But trees don't grow completely straight up, so let's add some random pitch and roll, set both to 5 degrees. To apply changes you can of course erase and repaint your trees, but you can also just reapply transforms. Choose Reapply brush and drag all over your trees. Last thing, collision. If you click on LOD variants, you'll see two properties in fact, Mesh and Spawn Spatial. Spawn Spatial can be any spatial scene you'd like. In our case, it will be a pre-made static physics body. Find body plants tree pine dot scene and drag it over Spawn Spatial for each of the variants. Collision shapes should appear in the editor. Finally, clean up any overlaps or weird placements and let's move on to bushes and grass. Add two plants, select the first one and add two LOD variants for bushes. Set their density to 100 and LOD max distance to 50. Set the scale to 2 and 3. For grass it's going to be 3 variants, density of 4000 and max distance of 30. Give it the same scale as the bushes and set LOD kill distance to 50. That way, when your camera moves far away, grass will disappear entirely. Key difference here is that bushes and grass usually align to the ground. You'd want to orient your foliage to the terrain normal, a vector that represents surface orientation in 3D space. In grass settings, set primary app vector to normal. Grass will now fully align to the surface underneath. In the bush settings, keep primary app vector as Y and make sure secondary app vector is set to normal. Set up vector blending to 0.3. Now, the up direction of your bushes will be in between these two. In terms of environment design, this means our bushes will mostly point upwards while slightly aligning to the surface. In Spatial Gardener, you can paint with several plant types simultaneously. Deselect trees, select bushes with grass, and paint them. If you can't see your grass, temporarily disable LOD kill distance by setting it to -1. Overlap detection is not supported, so you should clean up any jarring overlaps manually. All that's left is to optimize your octrees. Rebuild bushes with a max chunk capacity of 50 and grass with 500. Then recenter both. Here we go! Your level is ready for playing. Launch a scene and give it a go. Congratulations! You're now able to set up a plant and paint it on your terrain.